Do you believe being a writer is in our DNA?
I personally do, for two reasons. One, there's emerging science that says we pass down a lot more traits in our DNA than previously believed. I also just know it for myself because for many years, of course I went by the last name of my dad, but as I developed my interest and really found out who I was, I realized I was much more aligned with my mom's side of the family that were dancers, musicians, directors, writers. That's really who I am inside. It just took me a long time. When I was in school, I always did really well in English. Always did well, but I was extremely curious and nosy, sometimes to my own detriment. And thought journalism was the end-all be-all, perfect for my DNA. But I was off a few chromosomes because fiction, nonfiction, being more expansive was really just part of the story of my family. That's what people did, told stories. I had an uncle who was murdered, unfortunately, great uncle, brilliant guy, 16 years old, was there at the beginning of Universal Pictures. And he couldn't help himself telling stories, being interested, and neither can I. And, it was really a searing moment when I realized that's who I am, because my mom, who always wanted me to be a writer, had gone on back to her next life. And so, I'm doing it for her. And, and when I say my prayers, I thank her every day for, seeing the person I was meant to be.
You were the kid that always asked why?
I was the kid that asked a lot of whys, probably to the point my parents and I said in an essay were reaching for earplugs. And I also got bored at school. I was the kid that would look out the window. I mean, I was a good student and attentive, but I did lose attention. I didn't need to do advanced geometry to get a taste of what that would be like. I wanted to more transport myself into history, or to see how Fitzgerald did it in The Great Gatsby. But it took me a long time to figure it out.
How did you realize you were a writer? You were curious, but how did you realize that writing was for you?
I think I got a really good grade on like an English exam, like in fourth grade, where other people weren't doing so well. And it just kind of worked in my mind. And I always liked books. I loved like Three Musketeers, Robinson Crusoe. So I read a lot. I was the youngest child in a very lonely, fractured house. I had two older brothers that were gone. And so often it would just be me, myself, my books, and my dog. And I would just read or, come up with ideas. So it was kind of, not forced on me, but it was a natural evolution. And I think it was then, very early, I just liked writing. The pen just moved across the page. It was not the way it always was in mathematics. That's actually a big part of my next book, my next novel, the follow-up to Arroyo, because it is based on a true story. My dad was a mathematical genius. It would be so ridiculous that he, when I was struggling through pre-calculus and other mathematics that just, that just weren't in my DNA, he could beat my Texas Instrument calculator with his slide rule. That's how smart my dad was. Empathy, I don't think they make a slide rule for empathy, but in terms of advanced mathematics, man, he had it. And so that was, it's interesting when you're a kid, because that's, you start really realizing who you are in opposition to your parents. So those two things came, and my dad I don't think my dad read a novel after Caltech made him read 3 or something, going through civil engineering, they had to take some English class. And yet I never read one of his, advanced, astrophysics books. So, it was those two things, I was just being myself, but early on, it just came natural. Like some people can just draw. They just have that it quality. They have never taken a class in their stinking life. And these people get perspective and dimension and shading, which I never could do. But, I do think God touches in all of us some talent. And some people are more privileged than others to be able to develop it.
That reminds me of the thing when, if you can draw this, like send it in. Remember those in the back of comic books or whatever? And
Yeah, I had a friend in our little childhood gang of hooligans, and he just was a natural artist. And this is like in the early 70s, and he created a whole magazine based on cats as hockey players. Okay, get that around. Cats as hockey players, okay, you wouldn't imagine. And of course, he got to be the Kings because he was the biggest old guy. But I was always so jealous of Gerald. But then, I did my own thing.
And it was at USC that you realized that being a business major, correct me if I'm wrong, please, that was not for you?
You did your homework. Absolutely. I'm impressed. Yeah, I got accepted as a business major, which because I didn't really have the spine yet to send to my dad to say I'm not going to be doing that. And when I did, it was at a fraternity event. And there was like 150 people in this room. And he and I, what started out as me informing him on changing my major to journalism, became a massive John Hughes movie quality blow up where we were yelling at each other. My mom, the social butterfly, is mortified that we're having a public dispute, but it was just two rams going at each other on the mountaintop, and I think that was like my Declaration of Independence. And I did many other things as well, but I always hoped my dad would think, you know what, that kid stuck up for himself, or that kid's got stones. I never got there. Maybe he thought that, but that is really where I realized, no, I have to be my own person. And I had this amazing journalism class taught by Professor Fox, who was an AP reporter, just the best. Was not a touchy-feely guy. And this was like in the years after All the President's Men, Woodward and Bernstein. I mean, Bob Woodward was my hero. Upton Sinclair was my hero. I just love that romanticism of bringing down wrongdoing. So Professor Fox goes, okay, enough of the textbooks and assignments. I'm going to be a fictional mayor of a town resigning today on some corruption charges, and you each have one question to ask me. And at that moment, I fell in love. I just fell in love, and that's it. I knew what I was going to do. Even if my dad didn't want to speak to me, threatened to, have a hitman take me out, that is what I wanted to do. And it took me some years to get back to that. But, when you fall in love with a person or an idea. And that, for me, I was swooning when Professor Fox did that. And I had many other wonderful teachers that believed in me, and, I'm so grateful USC, was there. I am sincere about it. That is, when journalism is in my blood. And I was always so proud to tell people, what do you do for a living? Oh, I work for IBM, or nothing wrong with that. Or, I'm a patent lawyer. It's like, what do you do? I'm a journalist. And then, you'd also hate yourself for saying that, because the first thing out of their mind is, the story you should do is. It's like, oh, Jesus, I should have just told them I'm a patent attorney, because nobody has ideas for a patent attorney. Anyway.
Chip, you've said previously that you're a type A personality.
Yes.
How does that help in being a writer, and how does it a hindrance?
I think it helps because that's a very good question. It helps because you learn not to rely on anybody else. You learn, for me, fire in the belly is not, a mood of the day. That is a natural state of being. And so I do have a fire in the belly. And oftentimes I've directed that fire in the wrong place. I think it's fire in the belly. I also think the downside of being a type A is you're very self-critical. I've crucified myself more times than, there seems to be nails available in the world. And it isn't always the best for your sleep. I've always struggled with my sleep. I have had insomnia before the biggest moments of my life, and including taking my grad school test, where I swear I was so prepared and I slept like 1 hour. And I was back in grad school in DC. This is actually a pretty funny story, I think. I was going to McDonald's, of course, for the Breakfast of Champions before my big test, right? It's like a 7-hour test. And I'm so friggin' tired. And I didn't see a crosswalk, people coming, and I skid. I almost hit Patrick Ewing, who was an extremely famous basketball player who was attending Georgetown back then. And so I almost killed like $100 million of basketball contracts because I was so sleepy before my test. But it is amazing what you can do with caffeine and adrenaline. But being type A, I'm very laid back, and some people would say too nice about many things in my life, but I think when it really matters, the type A comes out, and it's, you're living with a fire-breathing dragon because you're just so motivated. Two type A's together can be a very dangerous piece of alchemy, and you have to be very careful. And sometimes you just need to have a type A, and you need to have an alpha and a beta. But two type A's can produce a lot of good, and they can also immolate.
What makes you proud to be a writer?
As opposed to a reporter or book writer?
Well, it could be all in one. Maybe there's parts of being a writer that you feel more proud of.
For me, when I was a reporter, when I wrote a story that I never set out to write, because I was practicing observation and tricks of the trade and just trying to keep my ear open for somebody to tell me something that they want to tell me indirectly, and then I get a big story out of it. That's what I felt good about. I was never a crime writer, even though I wrote a true crime book I'm very proud of, The Darkest Glare. But I was doing a story about political incestuousness of a local city. And this woman, while I'm working on books, because I freelanced even after I left daily journalism because I just love journalism. I believe in it. And this one woman goes, "Oh yeah, if you could only figure out who killed this guy." It's like, what? And then, I took that and I said, well, give me every phone number of anybody you think knows about this. And I went around and around and around and just, and from a 5-second comment became a story, that got the police off their lazy asses and reopened a murder investigation, that this little city didn't even want reopened. So, also I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. In terms of novels, I will say, I don't believe in death. I do believe that this is just the thinnest of eyelashes of existence. But in this life, when I read my book, Arroyo, my first, it was the first words of fiction I've ever written in my life. I've never written a novel. I've read a gazillion novels. But, this is historical fiction, tongue-in-cheek, little splashes of magical realism. But when I would go back and, there's many famous writers in the world, I'm still learning. I came into fiction late, but I read a sentence, I think only this moron could have written this, and that will last. Even if the world blows up somehow or another, I created something, only I could do through, the big man upstairs. I think that's kind of cool. Nobody will ever put together this permutation of words or thoughts, and it's like, what? I think my mom is happy with me. That's what makes me feel good. Not seeing it on a bestseller list or some producer calling up or whatever, you know what I mean? Just kind of knowing, I've created a little rivulet in a bigger stream.